Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Mystifying Miracles. My name's Kristen. We have a good story for you today. We always go over true stories that always have a miracle element in them, a lot of times more than one. So listen along if that sounds right up your alley, and we'll get started. So this story, it takes place December 24th, 1983 in a suburb of Chicago. And of course, it's blistering cold outside. It's almost Christmas time. And a woman, a mom, was anxiously awaiting for her teenage sons who were it didn't say if they were in their freshman year, but they were coming back from college for a holiday. And she was anxiously waiting. The time was ticking. It was getting later. And she was starting to worry a little bit. And the reason for her worries, there were many reports that night for record-breaking temps. They were really low, and news stations and radio stations were saying that it was very dangerous to go out and to stay in by all means, and don't try to venture out. So that's another reason why she was just a little bit uneasy about it. Her son, Tim, and his two roommates from college were driving from Connecticut to Illinois. And so he was bringing some buddies with him, her son, Tim. So he wasn't going to be alone, but still, it's not like he had a new car or anything like that. It was older, so she was worried about him breaking down or getting stranded. And also, you got to remember too, with these older stories, they happened before cell phones, really. So there was not really a way, unless you stopped at a payphone, which Tim had not done. So another reason why she was worried. And so she just stayed up most of the night, pacing back and forth and just praying that all was okay and that they'd be driving up any moment. She would later learn that they stopped in Fort Wayne, Indiana, to drop off one of their buddies by the name of Don, where he lived with his folks. So they had stopped there, and she had no idea that that's what they were doing. And you would think at this point, okay, you probably should stay the night there, get up in the morning and continue your trip, right? But these are, teenage young adult boys. Sometimes they don't think ahead. That's anybody at that age, girl or boy. So they weren't thinking, they had no idea that the reports were even saying, don't go outside. They just knew, okay, it's cold, but no big deal. We'll make it back. So yeah, and in their defense too, the boys were thinking, okay, we're just 4 hours away from home in Chicago, so this is not that big of a deal. 4 hours, we can do that. So another reason why the boys just said, come on, let's just try to finish the rest of this trip out. So they dropped Don off, and the roads, of course, are desolate. There's no one out on them because, again, the news said do not go out. So it's dark, crazy, and just like a very quiet ride when they first get going. And they end up taking this is a hard word for me to say, a rural road. They were taking it to get to the tollway to head towards Indiana. And they had gone on for a few miles on that road until all of a sudden the car stopped. And right before it stopped too, it was kind of lurching forward, like going in a sluggish motion. Like it would go, the story said it would go maybe 10 to 15 miles per hour and then stop, go a little bit, stop, until finally it did go kaput. And about that time, they had started listening to the radio reports, and they were like, oh gosh, they're saying not to go out. I mean, it is cold and it's snowy and dark. Maybe we should have stayed at Dawn's. So the boys went on a little, right before it stopped, it said I forgot to add in, it did go on for 1 more mile before it did finally sputter out. And when it sputtered out, it was on the top of an incline that they got stuck. So they could see far, far off, lights from houses, but it was miles and miles. And they were able to see that because they were at the top of the incline. But other than that, all around them, darkness, woods, forest, more quiet, dark roads. There were no headlights, no people, no homes. The boys were getting antsy. They were getting a bit scared at this point, and they didn't have a clue what they would do. The car started getting really icy cold once it stopped and the heat wasn't circulating. And even Tim's feet started to feel numb. And they sat there for a while just hoping. Tim said a little prayer. He wanted anybody to just come along and be able to help them. And they were frightened and cold. And finally they started to fall asleep. And just as their eyelids, they were almost out for the night, falling asleep. All of a sudden, there were flashing headlights right behind them coming up close. And the first thought Tim had was like, I've been looking for a long time, right up until I was almost asleep. Didn't see a sliver of light. Didn't see anybody coming. Like, where did this person come from? So he's thinking those thoughts. And all of a sudden, knock, knock, knock on his driver door. Also, as the guy knocked on the window, he quickly thought, Tim did to himself, he's like, did we die? Because he had almost been fully asleep. So you know how that when you wake up in that state and you're like, oh, especially if you're stranded in the middle of nowhere, I can see how that would probably be my first thought too. But anyway, he rolled down the window. Both boys were in shock, and the guy says, need a pull? Both boys in unison scream out, yes, yes. They asked the guy, the tow driver, if he could tow them to Dawn's house because they had just left not that long ago, and it would be way too far, 4 hours home to Chicago to be towed. So, he said that he would, and Tim remembers looking at the side of the tow truck, and he got kind of worried because there was no writing, there was no company name, no phone number, no nothing, just blank. So he kind of worried for a moment, like, okay, who is this? At least it's a tow truck, but will I get some enormous bill later on? Because I have no idea who this is. But, when you're stuck, life or death, and they're like, we're going, yes, please tow us back to Dawn. So they hopped up in the cab, and they actually stopped on the way back so that Tim could call Dawn and his family on a payphone, tell them what happened quickly, and say, we're being towed back to your house, just so that they wouldn't frighten them in the middle of the night. And so they get back in, travel on towards back to Dawn's. And during the trip too, Tim kind of thought to himself, okay, here's this guy dressed up in a parka, bundled up for winter. We don't know who he is. He never made small talk with the boys. He didn't do any small talk. He didn't say, how you do, nothing. Just said, need a pull? That was about it. So he's very quiet and to himself and kind of mysterious. I mean, that's the way I saw it when the description was written out. Just as they were pulling up to Dawn's home, both the boys thought, oh gosh, I can't wait to be warm and toasty inside the house. I'm so thankful that this guy picked us up. And Don was expecting them, so he was up and waiting inside of the home for when they got there. Both boys run inside, and Tim asked Don to borrow some money because he didn't have any on him or enough to pay the tow driver. And so Don says, oh, well, okay. But he looked out the window as this was happening, and this is Don looking out. And he kind of looks over at Tim and his other buddy, and he's like, what are you talking about? There's no truck. There's no tow truck out there. Pay who? And immediately, both boys were like, what? So they start looking out the window, from behind the curtains. And they're like, there was nothing out there. Just Tim's car. No tow truck. No noise. Couldn't hear any chains, chains from a tow truck. Headlight, nothing. So Tim runs out there and he's like, no, he was just here. He brought us, he towed my car back. So Tim's looking in every direction thinking, oh, I'll see the taillights or the headlights of the tow truck from when he left. But no, quiet, no headlights or taillights, no nothing. And so he was just kind of getting chills and thinking, what? just confused, but also tired because of the hour of the night. He had no idea. And it was also odd because, the guy just left and no Merry Christmas, no nothing, no have a good night. It was just like the boys got out of the cab, ran inside to try to go get money. And then when they looked out, gone. But when Tim ran out there, he did look down in the snow and he saw tracks. The tracks, get this, belonged to Tim's car. There was no second set of tracks from the tow truck at all. So if the tow truck had been there, there'd be tracks in the fresh snow, right? I mean, Tim's were. It gave me chills when I read this one, guys. Without a shadow of a doubt, I believe that was an angel. There's no other explanation, especially when you think about the tire tracks. Weird, because if it hadn't been for the tire track part at the end, I would have thought, okay, it's possible that a tow truck driver just came along and helped him out. Maybe he was a quiet old man to himself or something like that, right? But then you throw in the tire tracks. I don't think so. I think it's an angel. I'd love to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments if you liked this story or if it left you thinking the same as me or different as me. I just enjoy telling these things and these types of true stories, and I hope you do too. I really appreciate you guys who watch and follow and comment. It's fun to read and fun to meet new people. I hope to meet more and more as time goes on. So just remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys for the next one. Thank you so much.